I'm Stephen Wynn. I'm here today to talk to the four leading candidates for mayor about arts funding in San Francisco. You raised it first. You mentioned the hotel tax fund, which has been central and a real model around the country. It's languished in recent years. The funding level has gone down, and the historic linking of the hotel tax specifically to the arts has languished also. Supervisors Peskin and Tang have a proposed ballot measure in November that would restore that and restore the funding level to $16.3 million to start with some increases. Are you in favor of that proposal?
Absolutely, absolutely. I would be more in favor of a percentage of the hotel tax. In other words, a percentage instead of a number, because when we have great season, it's more than 16 million. And we rarely have truly bad seasons until now because of, when you have national and international newspapers calling our incredible city a slum, which is what happened with the New York Times 3 weeks ago, that's when you know this is a critical election. This is an election where you have to have a mayor who has the willpower and the motivation to make San Francisco be what it is, what it's always been, and not the concept of calling San Francisco a slum was devastating to someone like me, absolutely devastating. And when you have a slum, you don't have tourists. When you don't have tourists, you're not gonna have the hotel tax. So we have to do something about it, obviously for the humanitarian reasons first, but also for the social reasons and for the economy of San Francisco. When I hear tourists say they won't come back, it's heartbreaking to me.
Yeah, well, it's not just tourists from afar. Also, people come in from Walnut Creek and they, have to run a sort of gauntlet here. We're here in Civic Center now, where major and smaller arts organizations are really struggling with that issue. What can be done to sort of bring the arts organizations into that conversation about the way that sort of street life and civic life needs to improve here in order for there to be a sort of a rich economy at all levels, not just
a renaissance. Yeah, you bring up the topic that I talk about all over, and that's coalitions. There are no coalitions. The tech industry is a bubble, government's a bubble, and the neighborhoods are a bubble. And sometimes the neighborhoods and the government sometimes coalesce. However, getting into the tech bubble, making people come to the table on issues of drug abuse and homelessness and issues that the traffic. To get from my home on Pacific to 2nd Street this morning took over an hour. It was totally ridiculous. You have to bring all the parties together, and the arts should be involved in that party because the arts have customers or patrons from all over Northern California. People come down for the opera, the symphony, the ballet, from all over. And so they have to be considered in the conversation of how are we going to take care of the crisis of traffic and dirty streets. The traffic issue, let me just say, Uber, Lyft, and Chariot, 60,000 cars a day. Okay, that's pretty stunning. They came to town, they don't pay any business tax, they're doing business in San Francisco, and they double park all the time. So I have suggested every other block have a white zone where you meet your Uber. You don't meet your Uber in the middle of the block. The Uber gets off the street, so it's not blocking, okay? That would be one suggestion. Of course, another suggestion is to have as many people as possible take public transportation, which of course they're really encouraging. But your kind of patrons drive into town, and they should be involved in the traffic and the congestion issue at the table at City Hall with the tech industries that bring in 10,000 people per building. They all have to be at the same table. I did that with homelessness. I had people at the same table who hated each other. The Coalition on Homelessness, the Hotel Council, the Restaurant Association, the Archdiocese. I had everybody there that had an opinion about homelessness. And it took 6 months, and by the time we ended it, they were all friends, and we came up with a plan with Mayor Gavin Newsom that absolutely took the chronically homeless off the streets for 10 years.
We have talked about one other aspect of this before we move on to the schools, and that is the ways in which the arts, one of the arguments for the arts is that they bring money into the economy. It's not just people coming to the opera, they're eating in the restaurants, they're parking garages, all of that. Is that a case that it's important for a mayor to make about the importance of the arts, not just that they're enriching and enlarging us and making us the iconic city, but they're an important engine in the economy as well?
I hate to go past not just that they're the arts, because for me, other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play? I mean, they're not just the arts. Okay, you're absolutely right. It reminds me of when I went to China to get a panda. I went to China to get a panda because pandas bring $70 million a year to the zoo. Okay,
It's not just that they're cute.
It's not just that they're adorable and kid. Yeah, right. It's an economic issue. Having said that, the arts is clearly an economic issue for everything from restaurants to just about everything in the city. So, yeah, of course, there's the financial analysis of what they bring to the city.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel that's an argument that the mayor really has to continue to make and sort of?
Absolutely.
Again, circling back to the idea that there's so many other issues on the plate for the next mayor or anybody in city government, that the danger of the arts sort of being way back on the train somewhere. It's important for the mayor to keep the arts.
Absolutely.
Important.
It's inconceivable to me, though, that they're way back. If they're way back at the end of the train, then whoever is saying that or treating it that way doesn't understand the city we are. Oh. I mean, it's literally the soul of the city.
Just so you know, as the director of the African American Art and Culture Complex, I was a beneficiary of hotel tax revenue for the purposes of running an incredible 34,000 square foot arts facility. When I first got on the Board of Supervisors, what we discovered is the hotel tax legislation that had originally passed, it was amended by ordinance at the Board of Supervisors, and technically under law, that wasn't necessarily possible, and we discovered years later that was problematic. But I want to be clear that I made sure not only did we maintain in our budget the same level that exists for all of our arts institutions, that particular year when we discovered that error that occurred, I got the mayor to increase arts funding across the board by 5%. Mm-hmm. And it was absolutely amazing. Mm-hmm. But I do think it's important for the long-term stability of the arts to protect the arts funding, because right now it's not necessarily completely protected. Anybody who becomes mayor who wants to make changes could make changes to that funding.
Because of the way the ordinance is written.
Well, the ordinance technically by law couldn't, it would have to go, because it went to voters in the first place, it would have to go back to the voters. So there were mistakes made by the Board of Supervisors, and that's
what the Peskin and Tang measure is attempting to do. Are you in favor of that?
If it's attempting to make sure that the funding, the level of funding according to what was intended under the ordinance originally, if that's what it's intended to do, but I haven't had a chance to review it. If that's what it's intended to do, then yes, of course, I would be very supportive of that, and in fact would want to not only co-sponsor it, but also help to campaign for it.
So I just want to thank the arts community for working so closely with all of my colleagues to figure out how we can dedicate a funding stream that specifically goes towards funding our arts, big and small. I think we've learned that it is very difficult to always fight for the arts, and so I do believe in a dedicated funding stream, and I have supported a whole tax set aside to ensure that we continue to fund the arts, and so I support that direction, and I will certainly be working to make sure that we win.
Are you specifically in favor of the ballot measure that as written by Tang and Peskin?
I haven't seen the most recent iterations. Mm-hmm. I know it's been a dialogue.
It's still a work in progress.
It's a work in progress, and we're still negotiating the final details. But I support the overall concept mm-hmm. of dedicating a greater percentage of our hotel tax to the arts.
In other words, restoring what the
yes, restoring the previous.
So I was a big supporter of Prop S,
mm-hmm.
and I know that there was consideration of Prop S 2.0, and I think the Tang-Peskin proposal came out of all of that.
Right, I believe that's true, and I think the arts people are solidly behind this.
Yeah.
And you would support it yourself.
And yes, and historically, interestingly enough, we have to go back to the crash of '08, where a desperate city needed money to balance its budget and took the hotel tax fund
Once
money.
Again, the icing argument, huh?
Yeah. And it was, we need this money, too bad, and maybe there might have been a hint that we'll restore it later when we get over this hump. That never happens, of course. And so the community had to go down a warpath to go get it.
Yeah.